For years, the semiconductor race has seemed remarkably straightforward. Whoever could manufacture the smallest, fastest, and most advanced chips would shape the future of computing. Governments poured billions into fabrication plants. Companies competed to push transistor sizes even lower, and the spotlight remained fixed on the cutting edge of chip production. It appeared that leadership would be determined by who could build the world's most sophisticated silicon. But that assumption is beginning to change. Beneath every advanced AI processor lies a component that rarely receives headlines. Yet without it, even the most powerful chip cannot perform as intended. It's not a breakthrough processor, a revolutionary manufacturing machine, or a new transistor design. It's the foundation that connects everything together, and increasingly, that foundation may determine how far AI hardware can evolve. At the center of this quiet shift is an unlikely material: glass. Not the kind found in Windows or smartphone screens, but an ultra-precise engineering material designed for one of the most demanding manufacturing environments on Earth. As artificial intelligence drives processors to become larger, hotter, and more interconnected, this overlooked layer is emerging as one of the industry's most important challenges. The next chapter of semiconductor competition may not be decided solely by who builds the smallest chip. It may be decided by who builds the strongest foe. For decades, progress in the semiconductor industry followed a familiar formula. Engineers packed more transistors onto every new generation of chips, delivering faster performance, greater energy efficiency, and lower costs. That relentless pace became the foundation of everything, from smartphones to cloud computing, and it shaped the competitive strategies of governments and technology companies alike. To stay ahead, manufacturers invested enormous resources into ever more advanced fabrication technologies. Producing leading-edge processors requires some of the most sophisticated equipment ever developed. Along with factories that cost tens of billions of dollars to build, access to these capabilities has become one of the defining advantages in the global technology race. But artificial intelligence is beginning to expose a new reality. Modern AI workloads demand processing power on a scale that traditional chip designs were never meant to handle. Instead of relying on a single, increasingly complex piece of silicon, manufacturers are assembling processors from multiple specialized chiplets that operate together as one unified system. This approach allows designers to improve performance without depending entirely on shrinking transistors with every new generation. That shift changes where engineering challenges appear. As more chiplets must exchange enormous amounts of data at incredible speeds, the technology responsible for connecting them becomes just as important as the chips themselves. Performance is no longer determined solely by what happens inside each processor. It also depends on how efficiently those processors communicate, how reliably they handle heat, and how well the entire package functions under constant demanding workloads. In other words, semiconductor leadership is expanding beyond fabrication alone. The next breakthrough may come not from making chips smaller, but from rethinking the technology that brings those chips together into a single, high-performance computing platform. For decades, the semiconductor industry relied on organic substrates because they delivered exactly what engineers needed. They were reliable, relatively affordable, and well-suited for generations of processors that were smaller, cooler, and far less demanding than today's AI accelerators. That environment no longer exists. Modern AI chips consume enormous amounts of power while processing vast streams of data around the clock. As computing density increases, so does heat. Every cycle of powering up, operating under heavy workloads, and cooling down places stress on the materials beneath the processor. The problem is that organic substrates naturally expand and contract as temperatures change. The movement is incredibly small, far too small for the human eye to notice, but inside a processor, microscopic changes can have significant consequences. Imagine constructing a skyscraper on a foundation that shifts by only a fraction of an inch every day. The movement might seem insignificant at first, but over time, it places additional strain on the entire structure. Tiny misalignments begin to accumulate, making precision increasingly difficult to maintain. A similar challenge exists inside advanced processor packages. Thousands upon thousands of electrical pathways connect chiplets that must exchange information at extraordinary speeds. As the substrate subtly changes shape during repeated heating and cooling cycles, those pathways can gradually drift away from their ideal positions. Even minimal changes may weaken signal quality, increase electrical interference, or reduce the long-term reliability of the package. The challenge becomes even greater as AI processors continue to grow. Each new generation typically contains more chiplets, more interconnections, higher power consumption, and greater thermal output than the one before it. In other words, every major trend in AI hardware pushes existing substrate materials closer to their practical limits. Engineers have spent years improving organic substrates, and those improvements have been remarkably successful. But every technology eventually reaches a point where incremental refinements deliver smaller returns. Rather than solving tomorrow's problems, they simply delay them. That realization has prompted a broader question across the semiconductor industry. If future AI systems require processors that are larger, faster, and more densely connected than anything built today, perhaps the next breakthrough won't come from improving the existing foundation. Perhaps it will require replacing that foundation altogether. When engineers began searching for a successor to traditional organic substrates, they weren't looking for a material that was simply stronger or more durable. They needed something that could solve several fundamental problems at once while supporting the next generation of AI hardware. This isn't the glass used in buildings, kitchenware, or smartphone displays. Semiconductor-grade glass is manufactured to extraordinarily tight tolerances, with properties specifically engineered for advanced chip packaging. Every sheet is designed to remain stable under conditions that push conventional materials to their limits. Unlike organic substrates, which naturally expand and contract during repeated heating cycles, glass maintains its shape with remarkable consistency. As processors generate intense heat, the foundation beneath them remains far more stable, allowing critical electrical connections to stay precisely where engineers intended them to be. That stability becomes increasingly valuable as AI processors continue to grow in size. Future computing platforms will rely on larger packages containing multiple chiplets, high bandwidth memory, and specialized accelerators working together as a single system. For those components to communicate efficiently, millions of microscopic connections must remain perfectly aligned. A foundation that resists movement makes that level of precision far easier to achieve. Glass also opens the door to dramatically higher connection density. Because of its physical characteristics, engineers can place electrical pathways much closer together than is practical with conventional substrate materials. More connections within the same area allow chiplets to exchange larger amounts of information while reducing communication bottlenecks inside the processor package. Signal quality is another important advantage. As electrical signals travel through a system, every material introduces some degree of loss or interference. Glass exhibits excellent electrical properties, helping signals travel with greater consistency across increasingly complex processor designs. Cleaner communication means less energy is wasted correcting transmission errors, and more computing power can be devoted to actual workloads. Taken together, these advantages fundamentally change what engineers can build. Instead of designing processors around the limitations of the substrate, future chip architects can pursue larger and more sophisticated computing systems with greater confidence. More chiplets, more memory, and more specialized components can be integrated into a single package without encountering the same constraints that have challenged conventional designs. That is why many industry observers view glass as more than just another manufacturing material. It represents an enabling technology, one that could expand the design possibilities for AI hardware over the next decade. The real breakthrough isn't that glass makes today's processors slightly better, it's that it could make entirely new generations of processors possible. If glass offers so many advantages, a natural question follows. Why hasn't the semiconductor industry adopted it already? The answer has very little to do with understanding the material itself. Researchers have recognized the potential of glass substrates for years. The real obstacle has always been manufacturing them at the level of precision that modern semiconductor production demands. These tiny channels, known throughout the industry as through-glass vias, must be positioned with extraordinary precision. A single defect, no matter how small, can compromise an entire substrate. Unlike organic materials, glass leaves very little room for error. Creating the channels is only the beginning. Those microscopic openings must then be filled with conductive materials that form reliable electrical pathways between different layers of the substrate. Every connection has to remain stable despite constant changes in temperature, electrical load, and mechanical stress. Achieving that level of consistency across millions of individual connections is one of the industry's greatest engineering challenges. Manufacturing yield adds another layer of complexity. In semiconductor production, profitability depends not only on making advanced products, but on producing them consistently. If too many substrates fail quality inspections, manufacturing costs rise quickly, making even a technically successful process commercially impractical. Improving yields often requires years of incremental refinement, careful process control, and continuous learning on production lines. Even after solving these technical hurdles, manufacturers face another lengthy process: customer qualification. Chip designers cannot simply replace a critical component overnight. Every new substrate technology must undergo extensive testing for reliability, performance, and long-term durability before it can be integrated into commercial products. That validation process can take several years, requiring significant investment long before meaningful revenue begins to arrive. This explains why glass substrates remained a promising concept for so long without becoming a mainstream reality. The greatest challenge was never proving that glass could outperform existing materials. It was proving that it could be manufactured reliably, economically, and at the enormous scale demanded by the global semiconductor industry. And once that challenge began to look achievable, the competitive landscape changed almost overnight. While much of the semiconductor industry remained focused on advancing chip fabrication, China began investing heavily in a different part of the supply chain, one that had received far less public attention but carried enormous long-term potential. Rather than trying to compete in every area at once, the strategy centered on identifying a future bottleneck before it became an immediate crisis. The key advantage was that China did not need to build every capability from the ground up. For years, Chinese manufacturers have become major players in precision glass production for products such as televisions, computer monitors, tablets, and smartphones. Producing these massive display panels requires sophisticated manufacturing systems capable of handling fragile glass with exceptional accuracy. Flatness must be tightly controlled, defects must be minimized, and production yields must remain consistently high to keep factories profitable. Instead of viewing glass substrates as a purely scientific challenge, policymakers and manufacturers increasingly treated them as a manufacturing challenge. The objective was not simply to prove that the technology worked in a laboratory, but to develop the production expertise needed to manufacture it consistently and economically. Over the past several years, significant investment has flowed into companies working on advanced packaging technologies, process development, and production equipment related to glass substrates. The goal extends beyond publishing research or demonstrating prototypes. It is about building complete manufacturing ecosystems capable of supplying future generations of AI processors at commercial scale. This broader strategy reflects a recurring pattern in industrial development. Long-term competitiveness is often built by strengthening the less visible layers of a supply chain, the materials, manufacturing capabilities, and production infrastructure that support headline technologies. Whether that strategy ultimately succeeds remains uncertain. Developing a reliable glass substrate industry will require years of engineering refinement, customer validation, and sustained capital investment. But by committing resources before the market reaches full maturity, China is positioning itself to compete in a field that many analysts now view as one of the semiconductor industry's next major battlegrounds.